All right. And if everybody could also mute themselves as well. I mean, no cameras and muting as well. So if there's anything happening in the process, we don't disturb anybody that's enjoying the conversation. All righty. So we're going to officially kick this off. So I'm Brandy, as just stated, and I am here today with, on behalf of Prestige Capital, with a conversation with author Nova Lorraine as we chat with her about her new book, Unleash Your Supernova. Rachel Hersh is from Prestige Capital, and her and Nova are going to have this conversation today to help us leave with some actionable strategies for how we infuse creativity into our business and our lives, and kind of get past the year that we've kind of had and enjoy the lives that we're here to live and have so excitingly. So let me get into the bios. I'm going to start with Nova's bio. So Nova, born in Jamaica and raised in Connecticut with 5 siblings. Nova Lorraine is an award-winning fashion designer, brand advisor, and founder of the premier platform for creative entrepreneurs, Rain Magazine. Nova's debut fashion collection earned her Best Haute Couture Designer of the Year, and her designs have been featured on The View and in Essence and Vogue Italia magazines. She's a poet and storyteller at heart and has found success in her award-nominated podcast, Unleash Your Supernova. Nova spends her spare time guest lecturing at several universities and serving on advisory boards for the U.S. Green Chamber of Commerce fashion team and the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. Her newest entrepreneurial pursuits include the launch of the Pink Kangaroo podcast network for wild thinkers and the Rain School of Fashion, focusing on innovation and sustainability. Welcome, Nova. I'm going to read Rachel's bio. Rachel Hersh is the sales director, North America for Prestige Capital. She has over 20 years of experience as a financial executive in the areas of commercial finance, factoring, and business development. Rachel has a successful track record of working with hundreds of companies, from startups to high growth companies to turnarounds, to increasing their work capital and growing capital, as well as providing debtor in possession financing needs. Rachel is on the advisory board of Cosmetics Executive Women. She was selected as a woman in commercial finance for the secured lender and recognized as a top woman in business in Long Island by Long Island Business News. Rachel was also interviewed on 77 WABC Radio's Mind Your Business. Some of her speaking engagements include the Damon John Academy, Launchpad Long Island, Food Tech Fast Track, New York, New Jersey Minority Supplier Development, and various accounting and law firms for continuing professional education credits. Welcome, Rachel, and I'm going to hand off this conversation to these two ladies so we can get started.
Thank you so much, Brandy. Nova, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And to all of our guests, thank you so much for taking your valuable time and realizing that creativity and beating burnout is a really important topic, and also obviously to network with your peers. So welcome. Want to first show you the beautiful book that Nova has here to talk to us about today. And I'm going to tell you all how I know Nova Lorraine, who is the most dynamic woman out there and such a joy to have this event with. Years and years ago, Nova and I met at a networking function. And as many of you know, if I've met you and I have your business card, you're going to go into my database and you're going to get emails from me. And so we communicated since about 2014. Nova got a Thanksgiving email from me, and then she got follow-up emails. And one day she emailed me and said, I have a magazine called Rain Magazine. It is a fashion, culture, and technology magazine. And I would love for you to write an article about creative ways to finance your business. So we did. And so that article, which will probably go up in the chat, Brandy will probably put that in the chat, lives on in perpetuity on our website. And that article, which was written in 2016, is out there. And then here we are years later, within a couple of months ago, I get an email from Nova. Hi, I wrote a book called Unleash Your Supernova. Please look for it. And, just sort of a marketing email. And immediately I emailed her and said, wow, this is Kismet, because I'm putting together creative series and I would love to interview you about your book. And here we are interviewing Nova about her book. And so that leads to my first question. Nova, why do you believe this book is important, especially now?
Oh, I think, when I wrote this book, or the concept came to me actually in 2017. And so obviously years before the pandemic. But my journey as a mother, as a creative, and as an entrepreneur made it apparent that there needed to be something in the market that just gave a very basic guide, guidepost on how to navigate this journey of life, of entrepreneurship, and staying balanced. And, during the pandemic is when my book was picked up by a publisher. I finished writing it in the fall of 2019, and we started pitching it right before the holidays. And then it was picked up in the spring of 2020. And the publisher equally agreed that the timing was so perfect. We're all dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety. And as you know, my background is in clinical psychology, and I very, very much experienced myself the micro trauma of what was happening, as an individual, as a creative, as a mom. And, here we are as creatives and entrepreneurs, where our gifts aren't and our talent is what our livelihood is based on. And we're expected to produce something, during this lockdown, like what? Um, and so it was even, for me, it was even more imperative to get this book out there. And it wasn't planned at the time when the idea came to me, in terms of the chapters on mindfulness and sound, as you said, as you commented that you liked. But I had to put that in the book. And I was fortunate enough to be taking a grad course on mindfulness at the time of writing the book. It couldn't have been more perfect timing. And I said, these tools are magnificent. They have to go in there. Some people actually do these things intuitively, and they may not even know what they're doing is increasing their creativity and bringing down their stress levels from a biological standpoint. And so I feel, especially going through the pandemic, that we need as many tools as possible that are real and actionable and, easy to implement, to show us how we can manage our sense of self, how we can manage having a balanced and happy life, protecting our environment, our physical environment, our social environment, our mental environment. And so it's definitely a guidebook. It's easy to read. There's a lot of really fun exercises in the book, that you can take your notebook out, or you can write in the book itself and answer the questions and everything. And, from the feedback that I've been receiving, I'm so, so grateful that people are finding it impacting their lives immediately.
Yeah, I'll touch on something you just said, which is, we need to protect our environment. So one of the things that people know about me is I need to be positive in my life. That's just my calling card. It's who I am. My needle goes to happy. Very hard to be happy during a pandemic. And so one of the things that came about this year, and I don't think by accident, is about 6 months before the pandemic, I decided to hire a landscape architect to put in a beautiful garden with a Zen fountain. I had no idea when I put it in that, boy, would I need that garden under lockdown. And so starting March, I'm working from home. I'm working in the backyard. Beautiful flowers are popping up. My fountain is beautiful. And, people, friends, socially distanced coming to my backyard, started talking about the pandemic, politics. And I literally said, shut that down. It doesn't belong in my garden. And they kind of looked at me like I was nuts. But you know what? I had to preserve my sense of self, and I had to preserve my positivity. And I know that I am a light of positivity to people in my life. And if I go dark and negative, that's not good for anybody. And I knew that there was nothing I could do to change the circumstance. All I could do is just do anything that was positive for myself and for other people. So all the mindfulness practices, which I always, utilize, I had to double down on, and I had to teach people to double down on.
Yeah.
And that's so important. And just having this conversation and having this book out there, Nova, I mean, it's a godsend. And it's not an accident that you were doing, meditation classes and, learning about sound and sound waves, and actually share with us. I know it's one of the nuggets from your book, but do touch on the sound wave and what that is. People will know they must buy this book if they want all the details, but we'll give away one nugget for free.
Yeah, definitely. So there is a chapter that talks about sound and frequency and how it affects our mindset and how it affects our creativity. And one of the frequencies is 528 hertz. I came across this some years ago while still living in Florida, and it was intriguing. And so I started going down that rabbit hole and doing more research. And it's part of the solfeggio sound frequencies, the do, re, mi, fa, that scale, that musical scale. And this frequency is often called the frequency of creation. And it's what chlorophyll resonates at. And so it's no accident that doctors are saying for mental health now, go outside and take a walk. If you're experiencing headaches or depression or anxiety, to be around nature. There's no accident why we love gardening, why I did cross country for years, in high school. And I didn't know this, but now I know it was definitely a practice of active meditation. And so it's just being around these higher frequencies that lift our own frequency, which increases creative output and biologically decreases our levels of stress and anxiety. So that's definitely a powerful nugget. And if you haven't written it down already, it's 528 hertz. You can go on YouTube, Google it, and a ton of videos will come up. I put it on right before I go to bed. It's also known for healing. So it repairs your DNA as well by being around this frequency. So it's amazing when you start learning about how much sound can impact our lives.
Yeah, and I'll just touch back on that, which is there are a whole bunch of books out there. One is called The Nature Fix. They're about, you don't know how much nature is healing and good for your body, good for your soul. My friends now call me the 10,000 step junkie because I must do my steps, but I do it in a park with a lake. And as I'm walking, all my creative juices start flowing. And I think about who I need to put in touch with who, or an idea about how to solve a problem, and at the end of the day, we human beings need to walk the earth. One thing that I think the pandemic has done is we've gotten outdoors way more than we did before. And if you can get away from your desk, I've taught people, if you're on a phone call, even if it's a work call, you could walk around or sit in your backyard and do that. And people have been thanking me because many people do not give themselves permission to step out of that desk, right? And that's something we all need. And I want to just touch on the creativity that came up in having, this is our third in a series of creative events. And they come about out of the results of all these walks. Our first one was a stand-up comedy show and a networking event. The second one was an online cooking event with Chef Brandy, who is our MC. And this third one is this book talk. And it was my idea to put out events that would feel good for people. There's a lot of Zoom fatigue, but to me, this is not fatiguing because what it really is, it's community sharing an experience. And this experience is particularly timely because of burnout. So Nova, let me ask you this. I mean, what role do you think burnout plays in our relationships?
Oh, wow. I mean, let's just think about it. When I'm a mom of four, and if I'm feeling low, I like using visuals. So let's just use a well, for example. If my well of inspiration and joy and energy is running low, and kitty number two knocks on the door and asks for, let's just say, a ride 30 minutes away to do XYZ, and I'm already exhausted, I'm not going to like pop up with excitement. I may even respond with a little bit of an attitude. And so I think that if we don't have a lot to give because we've been burning that candle a little too low, it's going to be hard for us to be truly engaged in our interactions, in our relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to be a familiar relationship. It could be a relationship with a coworker. It could be with your boss. It could be a friend. Your friend is in need and they want to talk, and they're going through a crisis, but you don't have enough to give. There's nothing left for you to give, and you can't be there for them. It could be for a mate, someone that you're dating. So I think that when we are burnt out, we may not even realize this, but we may be taking it out on those that are closest to us because it's easier to do that. So it could be just our tone and how we're communicating with those that are around us. It could be our lack of action and engagement and interaction because we just want to be left alone. And then that could be interpreted in a negative way. And that person that's receiving it may have no idea that you're at the bottom of your well, right? All they're doing
Oh
is
God, yeah.
right. They're getting the attitude or the scowl on the face, or maybe you're ignoring the messages or the emails, and you have no idea that you're actually crying out for help. And so I think it absolutely has a lot to do with our state of mind, but then also it can be something that protects us as well. If we create the right supportive group, if we create the individuals that you mentioned earlier with the garden and individuals coming in with what could be interpreted as negative talk, if you actually protect and be intentional about the conversations and the content that you're allowing inside of you, take that you're taking in and absorbing, that could also make a big difference. So I think being intentional of who you're around, especially when you're running low, and are those individuals that are going to lift you up, are they going to support you, are they individuals that are going to notice like, Nova, it's time to take a break, it's time to go for a walk, how are you eating, how are you sleeping, those that are paying attention. And then also it's important for you to communicate when you're not feeling energetic or as happy, or your day didn't go that well, just by those little words like, you know what, today I'm just a little tired. Just by saying that, people will understand. I remember right after launching the book and spending so much energy pouring into the launch of this book, about a week after, I just had to take a break and pull away from social media to recharge. And I knew I had to do that, or I would have burnt out, because this was a year in the works in terms of, pre-launch to launch. And so I need to take a break, recharge, and come back, with that same fervor and that same energy, and giving those around me that, because they deserve that. But I think it's so important to pay attention to those signs so you can use self-care to fill that well. You can use the individuals in your life to help fill that well. You can pay attention to the environment and the activities and the food that you're eating to build up that well. And so I'm going to turn the question back to you, Miss Rachel. What would you say that you do? Because you're equally creative and you're in a corporate environment and you're experiencing, the pandemic with everyone else. What are you doing as it relates to self-care and building resilience to burnout, and especially as it relates to maintaining and growing your relationships?
Well, this year has been actually a really transformative one in many ways. So during this time, my daughter fell in love and got married during the pandemic.
Wow.
And my son got engaged. And a lot of it was the pandemic caused this real looking at who you're with and what does that person mean to you. And watching love bloom during this time and sharing the stories of the unfoldings of these relationships put out so much positive energy to all my friends. And some of them are on the screen right now who were like, tell me more, because love doesn't know there's a pandemic. So that was one beautiful thing. The thing that I always do every weekend, pandemic or no, is I turn my phone off. I literally turn my phone off for at least 24 hours because people know, do not bother her from Friday night to Saturday night. She is just quiet. My job is really social and very on. And you know what? You say fill the well. That well is depleted by Friday night. There is nothing left in me. And I will just read books and magazines and have a delicious dinner and have a cocktail and fill the well, and then sit in my garden, and take a walk or go to the beach or whatever. And by Sunday, I'll like look at my phone a few times a day, and listen. And like anybody knows, your phone could be on do not disturb. If your children are calling, they're your favorites. It's going to go through. And nobody else needs to have access to you on the weekends, really. Okay. And so you have to guard your privacy. You have to guard your sense of self. I know that most people think the world's going to fall apart if they're not available. But you know what? Before we had cell phones, did the world fall apart? No.
Right.
Toggling through social media, which we all do, you think like, oh, I'll be on in 5 minutes. An hour later, you're on it. If you just put your phone away, guess what? You might read a book, which you will learn so much more from than whatever some celebrity is up to right now. So the self-care is about filling the well. It's the whole idea of, you have to put on your mask on the airplane before you can put on your child's mask. If you're not well, nobody around you is going to be well.
That's right.
And what you say about your children, I know that when my kids were living home and I was stressed and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not myself. You're not good for anybody. Fill the well. That's like the message. So beyond your book, how are you getting the word out about burnout?
Yeah. So, doing more events like this, sharing the knowledge, really, really excited about an event that we have coming up called Burnout to Bliss. And it will be held on Clubhouse as well as Zoom. That is May 19th. It's in honor of Mental Health Month. May is Mental Health Month. And it's a matter of not only sharing stories of burnout, because it's real. And I think other people need to know that they're not alone in this, but then also sharing words of wisdom and how to build resilience, how to pivot, when to pivot. I have a story when I was in grad school and I was pursuing my PhD in clinical psychology. And this little birdie in my head, or voice, whatever you call it, just kept saying, you got to go to New York. You got to go to New York. And for those of you that are meeting me for the first time, I was on this path of medicine for so many years. And I took a year off between undergrad and grad. And during that year, I had this aha moment of wanting to pursue fashion. And so I actually applied to fashion design schools and had gotten in, but I also applied to grad school, which was the plan, and got in full scholarship, job, teaching job, everything. And I was happy. And so I'm going along my merry way, a few months into grad school, and I started getting these chest palpitations. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like what's going on? So I go to the doctor, all freaked out. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I dying? And he was like laughing almost, because he's like, you're completely healthy, first of all. And he said, there's nothing wrong with your heart. He said, let me ask you a question. Is there anything that you're stressed about? Because I think you might be experiencing anxiety. And here I am, grad student, right? I think I've arrived, like we all do when we're young.
Right.
Oh, I know everything. I was like, I'm a grad student in clinical psychology. I think I would know if I'm experiencing anxiety. And I was like, oh, he must be crazy. No way. So I'm driving home and I just started thinking, I'm like, what could it be that could be, stressing me out? And the more I thought about it, I was ignoring this urge to study fashion. And once I embraced that, and it was a very difficult decision, and I had to, decide, to pivot from clinical psychology and move to a strange city at the time, which was New York City, to pursue this, I would say, all of a sudden dream of becoming a fashion designer. It was so left field. But I did, and I embraced that notion, and I started taking the steps towards that. And as soon as I did that, the heart palpitations went away. And so I think it's so important for us to know and recognize when we need to pivot. And sometimes it may be due to where you live. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a career choice. For me, it was, academic and a career choice. And so understanding that our bodies are the best indicators of it's time to slow down, change course, pause, run the other way. And that was a quick story of how I was experiencing the symptoms. And it wasn't necessarily burnout, but it was, hey, Nova, pay attention. It's time to change course. And so doing events like this event with you and Prestige Capital, as well as this upcoming event on May 19th called Burnout to Bliss, is so important to just get the word out there, share, not only our stories, but our words of wisdom and how we can avoid this in the future.
Yeah. And, I'm going to touch back on something you said, which I was just thinking about now. You know, my pivot was here I am, a social person in a very social job where I was taking people to coffee and lunch and cocktails and cocktail parties. And it was like freeze, stop in your tracks. It was like somebody threw water in my face. Those first couple of weeks were really tough. I mean, what do you do when you're home? When you're not seeing people, when you're not on the train and a cab and doing all that, it was really difficult. So the first thing I did is I started really reaching out to people and saying, like, let us have these one-on-one Zooms. What I did find nice is that people that are in different time zones, traveling, people like Kevin Harrington, who used to be one of the sharks on Shark Tank that I was introduced to, I would never have gotten him on the phone. But guess what I did? And like he's like, oh, I got to get the gardeners here. Hold up, and you get like really a vision into somebody's life. I met more pets this year than I've met in my life, but I think that guard has come down because people are right there. The other thing that I pivoted to is that on my personal social life, I always serendipitously met creative people, whether I was working in WeWork or I went to a cocktail party. I always met people. I met a lot of famous people in New York walking the streets. So I said, how can I recreate the serendipity of conversations when I don't know where I'm finding these creatives? So if you ask the universe, hey, I want creatives, guess what? I got introduced to really interesting clients that were in creative industries, founders, entrepreneurs. And I said to them, I decided to start an event which I literally call Manifestation of Positivity. And it's my evening event. It's not a work event. This is like you're in Rachel's salon, and we're going to talk about what motivates us, what words of wisdom, what books are we reading, what songs are we listening to, and just share your truth, share your story. I've had about 6 of these events so far since the pandemic, and it's always magic. It's like you take a cauldron, you put people in, people are in different places, different experiences, but they're all there to just be open and share their story. And it's really filled my well of not having the real life interactions, but what can I do? So the problem solving and pivoting is really important. And I want you to share some of your, steps, your actionable steps that you talk about in your book, which is how to beat burnout with creativity.
Yeah, so let's talk about how to be more creative because most people think, oh, that means I'm going to paint more or sing more or write more. And that's their definition of creativity is within the fine arts. But that's one aspect of creativity. As you mentioned, problem solving is another aspect of creativity. Coming up
Mm-hmm.
with ideas, ideating is another aspect of creativity. So how do you create new ideas or get inspiration for new ideas, or how do you open up the space to be able to better problem solve and pull in information to then maybe take to your painting or your writing or your dance or whatever that physical expression is of your creativity. And so something as simple as getting up early in the morning. It's so like, oh, and some people think, okay, well, I get up at 6:30 to go to work. That's not too complicated. Well, then guess what? If you're getting up at 6:30 for work, then you may need to get up at 5:30 so you could just spend 30 minutes just with you. you know Maybe it's drinking your favorite cup of tea, or your favorite flavored coffee, or maybe it's just listening to your favorite song. Maybe it's going for a walk. If you can't go outside, walk around your house. I just moved back north from Florida a couple years ago, and during the winter time I literally found myself jogging around the house because I was so used to running and jogging outside in the mornings. I was like, oh, it's too cold to get outside, or it's snowing, and I'm like up and down the stairs. So you can get creative in that sense, in terms of you can do those kinetic activities in your own environment. So I would say get up early. If you already get up early for your routine, get up earlier. It makes so much of a difference when you spend that few minutes for yourself. Another thing is when you are planning your day, most of us are planning our to-do list as it relates to our family or our career or that business that we're running. But how much time are you planning for yourself? So when you look at the pie of 100%, 25% of that should be for you, period. Have nothing to do with your family, your kids, the aunt, the cousins, the mom, the dad, the business. It should be for you. So how much of that day are you dedicating to you? And that's the act of filling that well. If 100% of the pie is for everything else that you're giving, eventually, just like if you're drinking a cup of water, it's going to run out, right? So again, 25% of that pie should be for you. The other thing is change up your routine. Our bodies become complacent when we are on autopilot, when we are used to what we're about to do. So I'm sure most of us have heard about an exercise routine. When you're doing the same routine over and over again, it's recommended to change that routine, to trick your muscles so they start working again, right? So you hit that wall and you're like, oh, I don't see any physical changes, or I'm not losing any more weight, or whatever the goal is. You change. It's called muscle confusion. So you sort of recharge your brain when you change your routine. Maybe you change your bedroom around and now it's a whole different space. Maybe you would go to bed, let's say at 10:30 every night. Maybe try going to bed at 9 p.m. and getting up an hour earlier. Maybe in the mornings, every morning you used to take a walk. Well, maybe you read a book for half an hour before you take a walk. So think about what can you do in your day and weekly routine to change it up, to sort of recharge your brain. The other thing is do something mindful before you do an activity that's going to take a little more mental focus or creativity. So what does that mean? And most people are like, oh, what is mindful? It's where you're forcing yourself to be in the present moment. So there are plenty of things that you can do, such as meditation, yoga, simply deep breathing, just really focusing on your breath, walking, dancing, singing, standing in place, and maybe just jumping up and down, where you're just forced to cut the noise and bring you here. Because most of the time, we're either too far in the past or too far in the future. In the past brings us depression, frustration, anger. The future brings us stress and anxiety. So if you're experiencing any of those emotions, just kind of do a check-in to say, am I a little too far in the past or a little too far in the future? Because peace is where the present moment is. So these activities would bring you back to the present moment. Another trick, activate all 5 senses at once. So if you are, let's say someone said something to you that really just teed you off. This is just a little trick. This is the abbreviated version of it. What is something that you can see, touch, taste, hear, smell? If you're activating all 5 senses in the moment, like at the same time, you're immediately bringing your levels to neutral, and you are removing the anxiety or the stress or the anger or the depression. So just that simple trick is activating all 5 senses. And you could do that in your environment before you start your workday, by having a candle, maybe having your music accessible during breaks and things like that. Something that you really enjoy eating, having nearby so you can mindfully eat. So these are some tricks to help increase your creativity, which will then build the resilience to burning out.
Yeah, 100%. Something I'll add as well. I'm a big fan of the author Elizabeth Gilbert, and I follow her on Instagram. And one of the things she put in her post a couple of years ago was having a gratitude jar.
Yeah.
So every night before bed, you write something you're grateful from that day. Now, not easy in a pandemic to always have something to write, but you know what? If you woke up, that's something to be grateful for. That's number one, especially now. Number two, if you got out of bed and you had a delicious cup of coffee, you sat in the window like I do every morning and the sun is shining on my face. Like if nothing else happened in that day but those 3 things, I'm eternally grateful. If anything else happened, put on more of that. And so I write one every night, and then on New Year's Eve, my ritual is to open that jar, read every note.
Oh, I love that.
And if there is somebody that I reference in the note, like today, I will write a note about this event. And guess what? On December 31st, I'm going to take a picture of that note and send it to you, Nova, and send it to Brandy and say, wow, look at this. We were here on this date. And so it doesn't only give me a fond memory. I then share that memory with other people that were in my note. It makes them feel good that they made it into the note, but also then it reminds them. The other thing that I do, and this is something really simple that people might enjoy doing, every day at the end of the day, I look back at my photo from that date, from the year before that, and however many years I have on the phone. So I could say, where was I on May 6th? And then you just have, you might be in a picture with a friend. Maybe it was a friend's birthday. I just did this with a friend. Like I had pictures from this really swank bar we went to, and we kind of forgot about it. But now we're like, wow, that's where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And you're giving gifts to people. You're making people smile. And it's the easiest thing to do. And by feeling that you've given a gift to somebody, you feel happy, they feel happy, you're putting positivity out in the world. And I think that that's just a beautiful thing. So, on that note, I think we could talk for forever, but I believe there's probably a bunch of questions that people want to ask us. So, Brandy, do we have any questions?
As Brandy's gathering questions, your ideas made me think of a couple others that I want to share. So
Sure.
there's something called body scanning, and you could do this before you get out of bed and before you go to sleep at night. And you're just laying still, flat on your back, and you are I start from my toes and the back of my body, and then I come to my head and I work my way down the front. But I'm literally being intentional and paying attention to every part of my body, starting at my toes, to the bottom of my feet, to my heels, to my ankles. And I am thanking my body, thanking God for my toes, for my feet, for my ankles, for my legs, and I'm going all the way up. And what that does, it allows you to check in with your body physically, but then it also lets you appreciate the things the simple things that we take for granted,
Yes.
right? And so that body scan is another way that you can bring yourself to the present moment. And you could do that sitting at your desk, just literally paying attention to what are your feet feeling, what is your back feeling, and doing that throughout the day, or again before you get up and before you go to bed. And then one other thing that really helps is going back to your gratitude notes and jar. I love that, is to get into that space of what you're grateful for and build up, and then end those statements of gratitude with, for me, I say, ooh, I wonder what surprise am I going to get today.
Oh my God. Can I pause there? When I went into the city every day,
Uh-huh.
every time I set my alarm, the code on the door before I walked out, I said, what adventure am I going to have today? And I had one every day. I really did. And it's because you're walking out with that mindful
Yes.
idea of what interactions am I going to have? I would talk to people on the train and get to know them. And when you have that attitude, things are going to come to you because it's the energy that you're putting out. So thank you for reminding me about that.
It's so true. Every single time I say that, and I don't do it every day, I'm going to be honest. When I do, at the end of the night, I'm like, there was something major that made me smile for that day, and that I was not expecting. So
Right.
sometimes, like you said, when you just put it out there and be open to the positivity, and I love surprises. One of my daughters doesn't, but I do.
I do also.
So I'm asking for the surprise, and without fail, I get a great surprise before the end of the night. So I love that adventure as well. What adventure am I going to have today? What wonderful person am I going to meet today or speak to? What conversation, what little nugget of information I'm going to get today? So we can put that out there. So every day we're guaranteeing ourselves a little bit of positivity to, again, fill that well with.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. Brandy, do we have questions?
We do. We do have questions. So I'm going to get started. So the first question that I have is for Nova. So first, people are wondering, how can they learn more information about the Burnout to Bliss event? You mentioned the date, but not the time or how they can register.
Yes. So it's May 19th. If you go to the Rain Magazine Instagram page and DM us, we'll be able to send you a link both to the live Clubhouse event and the Zoom event. So, or you can email me directly at nova@rainmagazine.com. We will start promoting the event, and they may have already started promoting it on Instagram with the link. But definitely nova@rain, RAINE magazine. You can email me directly, or you could follow the Rain Magazine Instagram page, and you will be seeing it on our stories as well.
All right. The next question is for Rachel. Manifestation of positivity. How do I get an invite?
It depends who's asking. No, I'm kidding. You get an invite if you can bring positivity to the room. And that is really the criteria. Over this last year, I've had conversations with people that I couldn't wait to get off of the phone because they're negative, and some of them are, members of the family, and I love them, but it's like, oh my God, I can't. And then you speak to people who just have this beautiful style. So whoever you are that asked that, just email me and I will put you on the list. And anyone is welcome to be on the list if you can bring your true self, not your business self, not your persona, your authentic self to the room, and be vulnerable and share, what you're reading, what you're thinking. One of our guests literally shared with us photos she took of, what do you call it? Shooting stars. I forget the word for it. Anyway, like, it can be anything, but it has to be positive. So if you can bring that positivity, you'll get invited.
All right. Next question. Do you have any suggestions for how to recharge when you're burned out, especially after mental breaks and normal self-care routines aren't can't seem to fill the well?
Hmm. Yes, that's an excellent question. I would say one of the chapters, actually, it's the opening chapter of my book, is know your why. And it's the first chapter for a reason. I believe that a lot of us are led to where we are now due to circumstance, either how we were raised, where we were raised, the experiences we've had to date, and that's what led us to where we are. But how often have you asked yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I living where I'm living? Why am I associated with who I'm associated with? And really paying attention to not just the responses, but how the responses feel. So in the book, there is an emotional chart or scale that you can rate how that response feels. And then for every response, ask the question, why again? And do it at least 3 times. And so let's just say, for example, you're in your career because your older brother also did that career and you looked up to your older brother. And that response feels good, 100%. So then ask yourself, well, why do I look up to my older brother? And then, oh, because my older brother was always kind to me. Okay. Well, why was he always kind to me? Because I always gave him attention. And so each of those things, if they feel good, you're in the right space. But if you give a response and the response on an emotional level, and we'll just use a simple scale, it feels good or not so good, then you need to assess, do you need to change course or pivot? Another thing to do is really pay attention to who you're around. And again, like when we buy a house, we're very selective, right? If we can be within our budget, within our means. But how selective are you with your social environment and the content you're taking in? So yes, you may be taking those hot baths, you may be taking the walk, but yet you're just eating whatever is coming across, your path, and you're not paying attention to what actually feels good after you eat it. Or you happen to be sitting in the same place and it's next to this person who's really negative, or maybe they're playing a song that really agitates you. And just again, making those conscious, paying attention to your environment, the people, your immediate physical space. You see this like beautiful, like yellow marigold um, quilt that I have next to me. It's intentional. Like, this makes me smile when I look at it. I have sunflowers around me, and I'm not in Florida anymore, but it reminds me of the sun. So even just paying attention to our environment, what colors, what textures, what scents are around you, that can help keep you charged. But I would say if you're still doing the self-care, if you're doing self-care and you're replenishing that well and you're still feeling burnt out, please reassess your why. Please pay attention to who you're around and the content that you're taking in. And I will also say, ask for help. Find someone that you can speak to, because sometimes just releasing those thoughts that are buried deep, will also help. So again, like expelling the toxins that are in you, I think will also help as well. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, that was a great question. And I'll add to say, I have 2 friends that during the pandemic, they were New Yorkers and they realized, hey, I'm working remote. One said, I'm done. She moved to Florida. She is the happiest person. And one moved to Vegas because she loves the national parks and she goes hiking every weekend. And so not everybody can just pick up and move. I understand that. But you know what? Maybe if you never thought of it, maybe you can think of it. I think sometimes people don't even give themselves permission to
Right.
think about, why do I live where I live? Do I have to live where I live? I'm in this career for 20, 30 years. Do I really want to be in this? Do I want to change? Somebody I had lunch with today was in the finance world, but she went to grad school for an MFA, and she suddenly, fell into this career because she needed the paycheck. And somewhere after 20, 30 years said, you know what? I really want to go into like graphic design, web design, all of that. Totally pivoted, changed her life, is completely happy now. But how many people give themselves permission? And if you don't give yourself permission, you're never going to pivot. And then you will just stay in that career that makes you money. I have always taught my kids, I don't care how much you make. I don't care what you do. I care that you wake up every morning and you're happy. And I don't care if that happy puts a roof over your head. That's fancy, not fancy, as long as you can sustain yourself. And that being said, both of my kids graduated with degrees and they did very well in school. My son works for a microbrewery and could not be happier. And my daughter is a chef and could not be happier. So they learned from me that they could really do whatever they wanted. And I gave them permission. And I do think that there are many parents that don't give them their kids permission because they buy into that American dream of you must make X amount of dollars. But we see how burnt out everybody that makes X amount of dollars is. So unless you're joyful in doing that job, think about, what could I be doing that I would actually want to get out of bed every day? I get out of bed every day because every day is an adventure. When we're funding entrepreneurs. We're funding growing businesses, and of every kind. So I'm on the front lines of knowing what is coming next. Sustainable fashion, clean beauty, vegan food, tech, IoT, AI. These are words I didn't speak 5, 10 years ago, but now I'm funding these companies. I'm tasting their product. I'm using their product, and it's exciting. So follow your passion, the money follows. I think that's something that we need to touch on too. Why you're burnt out may be that you're not doing the thing that lights you up, and maybe you need to get out of that.
100%.
Yeah.
Nice. Next question. So there was conversation about waking up earlier to kind of get your day going. And what if you're not a morning person? How can you how can you develop an evening routine that would have the same effect if the morning isn't really your cup of tea?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. My sister is definitely a night owl. She's the evening person. I'm the morning person. I would say again, have your routine. And if you are someone who, watches TV and or on your phone or on a screen, it's I recommend to spend at minimum 30 minutes off screen, off your phone prior to going to bed. Like, give yourself that 30-minute break. But even before that, if you can carve in at least 30 minutes or 15 minutes of either reading or again listening to your favorite song, maybe you're journaling, maybe you're exercising, and 30 minutes may be for some hard to commit to if they have a really crunched schedule or they're exhausted by the time they put the kids to bed or commute from work. If 15 minutes is something you can commit to. I remember I said, okay, I wanted to get more reading in, and my schedule was like, and I said, I'm just going to read 15 minutes before I go to bed. That 15 minutes turned to 30, turned to 40. And so you'd be surprised if you just commit to that smaller segment of time, how you can build onto it, because it does feel good. So I would say, I'm saying instead of getting up a half hour before you start your day, take a half hour before you start your nightly routine and build that new activity into that. And even literally just, it could be, I'm going to walk around the house and I'm going to make up a song, and just be silly, for a half an hour, or not necessarily watching a screen, but maybe listening to comedy. If you don't like reading, like I love my physical books, but, do audio and listen to the book being read to you. So, but the main thing is finding a way to be still and be present and giving that time to yourself because you are worth it. And if you don't, eventually it's going to catch up to you. So yes, great question. If you're not the morning person, carve it out at night before you go to bed.
Yeah, and I want to answer that too. So anybody who knows me knows I am not a morning person. But if you text me at midnight, I'll probably answer if you're a friend. And I will say this, I shut down, for the most part, I really shut down my phone by 9 o'clock because I want to be, listening to a great podcast or reading a book. And even if I'm watching TV, I don't want to be interrupted because it's that constant ping, ping, ping that we become like a Pavlov's dog. We think we need to answer every email at any time of day or night. Just because somebody's emailing you at 9 o'clock, it's because that's when they have a free minute. It doesn't mean you have to jump at their command. And I know a lot of people in business might not agree with me. They think, oh my God, if you don't answer the client, they're going to be angry at you. And maybe there's professions that is true, but you're not saving lives. Unless you're a doctor and you're a surgeon, I think you cannot look at your phone all the time. You may look at it once an hour, and then definitely that half hour before bed. For me, I have an hour, at least sometimes two, where I'm journaling, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm listening to music, and it is me time and it's sacred. And if you don't create a sacred space for yourself, nobody's going to do it.
Yeah, it gets addictive too. Like when you start doing that, I remember this is when we were in Florida. We had this beautiful, I had this like, it was a new house and it was just this huge soak tub. I love taking hot soaks. And the kids would say, "Where's mommy?" If you don't see me for about 45 minutes to an hour, I'm soaking. I have my candles, I have my music, and they just knew, like, don't bother mommy. I'm soaking. And it just felt so good just to you're just giving back to you. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it is about self-preservation. It is about sustaining this and inner here. But it starts with you. So if you aren't doing it, you can't depend on someone else to do it for you. It's so
Right.
so critical. Again, when you look at that pie and all the things that you're doing and all the things that you're giving, at least 25% of that has to go back to you. So I love the fact that you do carve out that hour. And if you're just getting started, commit to 15 minutes. Something makes a big difference. If you just meditate for 5 minutes a day, when I say meditate, it's literally, again, it could just be breathing. 5 minutes a day has a physiological effect on your body and your brain. And that is just intentionally taking deep breaths. And for some people, that's really hard to do because they're so used to going, going, going. So even if you just start there, you are going to notice a physical effect on your body. So these things that we're sharing with you do actually make those changes in your brain and in your body. So when you start it, you're going to want to not to give it up. But it's just a matter of starting.
Well, like anything else, when people first started exercising, whether you're doing weights or whatever, you might not like it, your muscles hurt, but as your muscles start to grow and as you get stronger, then you kind of you look forward to that.
Yeah.
It's like anything else, you have to retrain your brain. You're right. 5 minutes of meditation, I think, and meditation scares people. They think they have to sit on a mat and have the right music. And no, no, no. You're right. Just breathe. Literally just breathe.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful advice.
All right, next question. Any favorite quotes and or authors you'd recommend for keeping stress at bay?
I'm going to just say my favorite quote, then you could say. My favorite quote is by Cheryl Strayed, and it is, "Put yourself in the way of beauty."
I love that.
And I actually, if any of you read her book Wild, it's about her mom who passed away and her journey on the Pacific Crest Trail. But that phrase stuck with me because I do that. And that is why I can be happy. If there's beautiful things in front of you, whether that's nature, whether that's a picture you like, whether that's a blanket that's yellow, a sunflower, that's a simple thing that you can do to control your life when your life might not be in your control, certainly during a pandemic, right? But if you can put yourself in the way of beauty, whatever beauty means to you, I think that's a game changer. So that's my favorite quote. Nova?
I have a book club. And it's called Tuesday's Book Club. It's a podcast. And we recently read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it is such a powerful book. And it breaks down from just not only you and your personal life, but also within your relationships, how to be in the now. And it sounds so elusive. We say be in the present moment, be mindful, meditate. It sounds like, well, what does that even mean? And in the book, he shows how you can experience the now moment and how important it is and how it truly affects your marriages, your friendships, how you go about life, how you grow as an individual. So I would absolutely recommend Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now.
Wonderful. And I didn't know you had a book podcast. So now that's great. If anybody knows me, if you know anything about me, it's that I'm a voracious reader. I probably read a book a week because I do allow myself that hour at night. And I allow myself that weekend. So anybody who wants to get into a book club, I'm all about memoirs. That is what I love to read because I love to hear about people's journeys and how they got from whatever circumstance they were in to where they are now. What I'm reading right now is Brandi Carlile, the singer, her memoir, which is called Broken Horses, and also grew up in really difficult circumstances. And the tenacity and just having faith in yourself and your abilities. Those kind of stories I find just so interesting. Another, there's a podcast that I listen to, which I highly recommend. All my friends know that this is like my podcast. It's called The Good Life Project. And the interviewer interviews people from all different, professions that just were able to do something magnificent in their lives. And a lot of them are people that pivoted, major pivots. And then if you follow that person, if you like them, half of them have written a memoir or there's a documentary. So I go down these rabbit holes of learning. And that's why I can stay open and creative, because what can I nurture in myself is what I know. But if you're learning from people across all walks of life, all different professions, you're going to learn about the music industry and the art industry and whatever it is that you're interested in. So I highly recommend that, The Good Life Project.
Yeah, no, I love reading as well. And a couple of the books that came to mind as you were sharing your story is The Nightingale and Chanel, the biography of Chanel. And I watched the movie years ago, but just got around to reading Memoirs of a Geisha.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So these are books, if you love history and, you love really strong characters, you're going to love these books as well.
And anybody here who's listening who wants to start a book club, I'm open to any creative ideas. So honestly, anything that you guys think of after this is over and you say, hey, Rachel, like, I'm interested in this. Do you think you could do something with that? Like, I'm open to anything. It's by being open that we're all here today, by being open to talking to Nova, by being in touch with her, by writing the article for her magazine, by getting the email about her book, by her, saying, hey, let's do an event together. Believe in what could come next if you're open. I think that's an important lesson as well.
Definitely check out the Tuesdays Book Club, Rachel. I want to hear what you think.
Absolutely. I didn't know you had that. Yeah. Any other questions, Brandi?
No, that's the last question, guys. But I do want to say that we are at the end of the conversation, and I want to thank both you and Nova for pouring into us over this last hour. And I want to take the time for me to pour back into you guys with some of the nice comments that people have left in the chat about this conversation that we've had together. So just coming back at you, what you guys have just given to us. So some things that people have said: excellent advice for improving our lives and dealing with uncertain circumstances. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for making me feel better about looking back at my photo memories. You're right. It's a great way of re-experiencing happy times. Nova, I love activating all of the senses and the body scan and the what do you call it? Gratitude jar, Rachel. Love the gratitude jar. And then love that quote, putting yourself in the way of beauty. So just wanted to thank you both for pouring into us. And I'm going to stop recording the conversation right now, unspotlight Nova and Rachel, so that we can all continue to have this chat ongoing and network. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.